Hey, everybody, welcome to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel. Mike Catalana with you today. We're 3 weeks away from the start of Bills training camp, and I know you've been eager to be hearing a lot of stuff about what's going to be going on. So I came up with 5 questions about the 2021 Bills, and let's start with this. This team's really good. They're talented. They're one of the top teams in the NFL. They are legitimate on the small list of teams that are legitimate Super Bowl contenders for this year. So it is positive. There's a lot of positives for this team. But if you're a fan, you know there are ways you can look at things critically, like what are the things they need to work on? What are the things that will take them over the top? So I came up with 5 questions for the 2021 season, and one might surprise you a little bit. And I'll start with that. And the question involves Josh Allen. He's spectacular. He was the big question mark for the entire franchise going into last year. Could he be a franchise guy? Well, he answered that question, no doubt. And one of these days coming up, maybe even before camp starts, Josh Allen's going to sign a new deal with Buffalo, and he's going to get paid like a franchise quarterback. So I think he has proven that. But what I'm wondering about for the 2021 season is, where did Josh's numbers go? Where is he as a player this year? Because they put so much on him last year, and he kept delivering and delivering. So I went back and looked at some of the top quarterbacks very recently and some of the ones who are still some of the best when they hit their big season. And what happened the next year? And I think it's not going to surprise you that all of them, coming off their either MVP year or their first great season, had a slight regression the next year. Now, none of them were bad. And I'm talking about Mahomes. I'm talking about Wilson. I'm talking about Lamar Jackson, recent years, even going back to Aaron Rodgers. They all went from the peak that they hit, dropped back down the next year. And they were still great. So the question is, what would be just a small regression in the numbers out of Josh Allen? And what would be a cause to say, not necessarily is he the guy, but can we count on him as much as they did in 2020? And let's be honest. I mean, Stephon Diggs was spectacular, and that was a big reason why Josh moved to that next level as a quarterback. But at the same time, Allen, I mean, he did everything for this team last year. He was their, certainly, obviously, leader. He was phenomenal in the red zone. He kept the turnovers to a limited amount. He made big throws in big moments. Did he have, 19 great games? No. But was he the better quarterback on the field in, I don't know, 15 with a couple of games pretty close, 16, whatever number you want to come up with? I mean, he was great. So what's it realistic to look for from Allen in 2021? Yes, he has Diggs again. He's got Beasley. Gabe Davis is going to take that step, I think. And then you certainly got to look at what they have out of Emmanuel Sanders, filling in some of those numbers maybe that they got out of John Brown. But things did go really well for Allen last year. So while we look at him, and rightfully so, as a franchise quarterback MVP caliber player, when I looked back, I mean, Mahomes went to 50 touchdowns. And then the next year, dealt with some minor injuries, and I think he had 26. I mean, Lamar Jackson went from MVP to last year. Again, circumstances are involved, but there could be some circumstances for Allen too, where he regressed slightly. Go back to Aaron Rodgers, who, started out pretty mediocre, maybe more like Allen after he sat for a few years and then took off. But when I was looking at Rodgers and his numbers, slight step back between his MVP year of 11 and 2012. Russell Wilson, who was a really good game manager type player, then became more dynamic, had a spectacular year in 15, slight step back in 16. The team was still good. And even a guy like Matt Ryan, who took his team to a Super Bowl, but then from 16 to 17, statistically, at least the numbers come back. And the reason I say that is we've talked a lot here on Josh Allen and where the bar is and how or use the football terms, the field goal posts just keep getting moved back a little bit because he's been so good. So to sit there and say, would Josh Allen take a step back and still be great? Yeah. Yes. Could he take a step forward? Yeah. It was pretty good in 2020. And I can tell you, he could be a better quarterback and maybe not put up the numbers. And I do believe with this offense, they're going to depend on Josh a ton. But I do think, they're also going to look at him with his value and maybe take some of the running off of his plate because he's got a spectacular arm. He delivers for this team. But, you keep running those quarterback sweeps and those power runs. And at a certain point, it could have an impact on the way he plays the rest of the time. So I'm not sitting here talking to you saying Josh Allen is going to take a step back and not be that guy. No. I think he proved a lot last year, and I think he's still going to be great. But I think as a fan, maybe you need to realize that he might be just slightly less statistically this year based on the history of other players. I mean, look, if he maintains those numbers and increases them every year, he's going to set every record. I mean, he was great. So I'm just saying coming into this year, the minute Josh has a slight regression in any game, there'll be questions. That's the way the world works these days, right? Was it, what was he? I mean, he could start out, throw 5 touchdowns against Pittsburgh and be on his way to another shot at an MVP. But I'm just going by history in the league, even with great players who, by the way, all of those guys, after a slight regression, went back to being who they were, and the numbers go up. And, you look at all the greats. You look at Jim Kelly's numbers. Sit and look at Jim Kelly's numbers sometime and realize, they do go up and down a little bit, no matter how great they are. So when I say it's a question, he just answered it so emphatically last year. I'm going to be very curious to see what he does this year. And that also brings me to another point. And there's a lot of talk here. And I did this without Dan Fates because I didn't want to get Dan all worked up before the season. But when I talk about taking some stuff off of Josh's plate, what about the run game and the dynamics of the run game this year and who gets the carries and how is the run game used? And this team is not going to be a running team. But just because you're not a running team doesn't mean you can't be better at running the football. And how are they going to spread those carries out? And what are they looking for in the run game? And can you depend on the run game enough that Josh Allen doesn't have to be your most dependable guy carrying the football? And, Devin Singletary, I think, is going to be physically ready to go. So is Zach Moss. These guys are both talented. They can both play. I think the confidence the team has in them is admirable. If you look and say, well, they didn't go out and use a draft pick to get a guy. They brought in Matt Breida, who brings high-end speed. And, he got mentioned by, I believe, Sean McDermott and Brian Daboll in the end of the spring news conferences about a guy who could really help this team. What's his role? And, when you look at what Moss and Singletary did last year, you say to yourself, they were not spectacular. And I think they're going to look for more out of that in the run game. I know you love Antonio Williams, and he was a flashing rookie, undrafted guy last year. Does he get a legitimate shot this year to show what he can do? Will he build faith that he can handle the pass blocking, that he can handle, not that he's shown this, but not turning the ball over in big moments? I mean, Zach Moss had a couple of those, and they sat him down. And he's a high draft pick. So, the bar is set at a certain place for an undrafted guy. So I think Breida and Williams may get opportunities to show what they can do. But I think it's going to come down to Zach Moss and Singletary. And can one of them show he's more dependable and make some big plays, both in the run game and the pass game? And I'm saying that to not only take it off Josh Allen's plate of having to run the ball, but also not always be so dependent on the passing game. And if you look at the AFC Championship game, it wasn't going great for Josh. He was running around. He wasn't great with his accuracy in that game. But they didn't really have a run game to bail them out, or at least to get them to a place to take off some pressure for a few series and then get back to throwing the ball. So I think the run game dynamic is another question coming into this year. And now I'll stay with the offense. And look, it's no secret, tight end. Tight end is an issue. Every Bills fan wants to see Dawson Knox take that step. And maybe he does this year. I know he went to, tight end summit and he's dealing with the greats of the game. Well, when your tight end says himself, first thing I got to focus on is catching the ball, it's an issue, right? He's not been a pass catcher. He wasn't a pass catcher in college. Go back to high school before he had caught a touchdown until he came to the NFL. He's a physically impressive player who has made some big plays and has run people over. But they want a guy who's going to catch the ball and make plays in the passing game and help out Allen, even in the middle of that field and open things up for everybody else. They brought in Jacob Hollister. Hollister, I think he has 74 catches in his career, 4 years, 2 in New England, 2 in Seattle. He was Josh's teammate at Wyoming. Could he add something? Yeah. But at the moment, how much faith do you have in the tight end to be part of the passing game? And it wasn't me, and it wasn't Jenna, and it wasn't Dan, it wasn't the media that came out first and said, you need more out of the tight end position. That was Brandon Beane who said that at the end of last year. So I've gone this long without naming Zach Ertz, but just look at what Zach Ertz has done as a pass catcher in his career. And I know everybody says the Bills' offense isn't designed that way. Yeah, it's not designed that way in part because they don't have a tight end who's a pass catcher. I've been covering the team for 34 years. They've never had a pass-catching tight end. Never. I mean, their history with pass-catching tight ends might be the worst in the history of the entire NFL. I mean, yeah, Keith McKellar caught touchdowns, right? They gave money to Charles Clay, but they've never had a guy that can run down the field and make catches. Zach Ertz is not a speedster. He's not Kelsey. He's not that guy. But his numbers are not Hall of Fame, but very good for the NFL. He's been a top 5 pass catching tight end during his career, and he caught a game winner in a Super Bowl. I'm still holding out hope that happens because he immediately jumps to the top and he immediately upgrades the position. So there's my rant on the tight end position as we look in the offense. On the defensive side, where's the pass rush coming from? I mean, Jerry Hughes is one of the oldest players on the team. He's got the most seniority on the team. He was their best defensive lineman last year. He had 4.5 sacks, but he got pressure on the quarterback. I think he had 12 quarterback hits, which led the team. But who led the team in sacks is A.J. Klein. And this team has not been great at getting to the quarterback. So what have they done? Well, they drafted A.J. Epinesa last year, and then they went with Greg Rousseau and Boogie Basham this year. So they recognize it's an issue. And I think they're looking for contributions from those ends this year to get to the quarterback, to put constant pressure on. And Dan Fates will remind me all the time, and he's right. When you get good pressure on the opposing quarterback, when your team has the lead and they're looking to throw on you and everybody knows they're going to throw. Yes, that's how teams pin it back and go after the quarterback. But even in those settings, the Bills were not a dominant pass rushing team. So Klein showed those flashes. Interesting they use him. I'm still going to hold on to the fact that I think Tremaine Edmonds could really help in the pass rush, but I think they're way past that part. They haven't used him in that role. But what do we see out of these guys? And, does Ed Oliver take a step forward, maybe now with Star Lotulelei back, where they can get Ed less on double teams, less playing a position maybe he's not suited for, and more of being able to get that pressure up the middle. So we all know it. I mean, they've tried to invest majorly in the pass rush, and it hasn't always shown itself, at least statistically, on the field. So let's see if that pass rush comes through. And it's a yearly question. And I'm a big Levi Wallace fan. I love the fact that he was a walk-on at Alabama, that he's an undrafted guy, and he fights for his position, and he made some big plays for them last year. But and I know they're constantly trying to either replace him or add pressure to him, right? It was Josh Norman that came in, made a couple plays, but he couldn't stay healthy. Dane Jackson is a guy everybody's excited to see play more. They drafted him out of Pitt. They think he can be a really good player for them. But there's a difference between doing that and saying he's going to be the guy who takes over in that spot. Cam Lewis got a couple of starts during the injuries. What he brings to the team this year remains to be seen. It's kind of hard to count on him, but you can never have enough corners who can play in this league. You're going to go with even a third safety. You're going to go with the extra corner all the time. Taron Johnson sort of hit the bench there for a little while and then came back and played really well at the end of the year in that slot position. But coming into this year, again, it's a question. Do they go out and bring in a veteran again? Do they go for Steve Nelson's name's been out there a long time? Do they do that? Or are they confident with the guys they have? Rashad Wild Goose has the greatest name on the team. Wild Goose? I mean, come on, out of Wisconsin, but it's a rookie and it's a later round draft pick. So I don't know how much you're counting on him to be that guy. But I think that it's been a question and it will continue to be a question. I mean, you do have Trey White, you got Poyer and Hyde. So how many teams in the league would trade places with having an elite corner and two outstanding safeties to start with? But what do teams do? They pick on that second corner, or they pick on whoever the extra defensive back is on the field. And they're going to play some great quarterbacks this year, and they're going to play some good passing offenses. And Kansas City's on the schedule, so you can never have enough. Again, these are 5 questions for this very good team coming into the 2021 season at training camp. I mean, there are other things to look at too. How's the offensive line shape out? It's pretty good when you've got Williams and Dion, who have taken the bulk of the snaps, look like they're your corners. We'll see how things go at center this year, whatever the weirdness was with Mitch Morris. But I think they're feeling good, depending on how much Cody Ford gives them. There's always questions there. I mean, you got Milano and Edmonds and Klein. And they're, again, a lot of teams would trade what they have at the linebacker position. And they're loaded at wide receiver. So they got way more pluses than minuses. But there are some things to keep an eye on for this year. Remember, as always, come here to the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel with Dan, Jenna, and myself. Constant information and our opinions, plus the interviews with the players. Also, check out our podcast on here where we talk a little bit about how we came to cover the Bills, what our background is, big moments, and all those things. You'll see that on there. And yes, I was covering the team before either of them were born. Hence the glasses today. Kind of needed it a little bit this morning, and I figured you wouldn't mind watching here on the YouTube channel. Again, the Buffalo Plus YouTube channel is your place. Comment, like, subscribe. Make us happy. I think you'll enjoy the content. For our team, Jenna Cottrell and Dan Fates, I'm Mike Catalana. Thanks for watching.